Big dog, we need to talk about YCS Raleigh and the events that happened over the weekend. There are some crazy things that happened over the weekend that can impact your game, especially with Legacy of Destruction coming out. I know it may seem like the same old song of last format, but these are some things you are going to have to know. Let's go ahead and jump on in. YCS Raleigh to a lot of people was an utter disappointment. With Snake Eyes completely dominating the event, some people think that it's still a tier 0 format. But there are some things that I think that people completely forgot about. One is the new ban list, so looking at new techs. And the other is that players not necessarily being prepared for the format, and normally when you're not prepared, you just go with what you know, which is Snake Eyes. Fortunately enough, there were some insane players that decided to go against the grain, and I'll be talking about those strategies a little bit later. But right now, let's talk about some really powerful tech cards that can change your Yu-Gi-Oh game. And the first thing I want to talk about, the first major thing I want to talk about that is a huge difference, is Baron and Borreload being banned. I think that there was a huge impact on those cards being hit, because now a lot of the strongest generic cards in the game are so easy to counter. There's actually a ton of cards that have come off previous Forbidden lists that players were teching in. One of the cards that I want to talk to you guys about, which I think is going to be a great tech to transfer over to Legacy of Destruction, is Change of Heart. With most Yu-Gi-Oh strategies not having a way to be able to negate spells, traps, and monsters, cards like Change of Heart and Mind Control are completely crazy. A lot of Snake Eyes players have been using Bestial Displatter as their rank 10 replacement for Baron, and then using Psyframe Lord Omega for the replacement for Borreload Savage Dragon, allowing you to essentially rip cards out of your opponent's hand. Well, funnily enough, a well-timed Change of Heart or Mind Control can take your opponent's Bestial Displatter, giving you the monster negate, and can summon out your opponent's Psyframe Lord Omega, which does the exact same thing to them. Before, that just wasn't possible. And another cool card that has been rising in the ranks is Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. This card is actually crazy. Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess needs to be able to decrease its attack to be able to negate a monster effect. Using Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit will not only destroy the Appaloosa, it would allow your monster effect to go through. But wait, there's actually more. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit can also be used on your opponent's IP Masquerena and SP Little Knight, as well as powerful spell and trap cards like Divine Temple and Snake Eyes, and even the new Tenpai Dragon field spell card when it comes out in Legacy of Destruction. This card is actually ridiculous right now. Because of this, players have been playing cards like Crossout Designator a lot more, especially if they are playing a deck like Snake Eyes using this card to help combat a lot of those hand traps. But then there's cards like Crossout Designator dealing with a tech card that I think a lot of people should look into. Curse Seal of the Forbidden Spell not only stops a spell card, it prevents the opponent from using that spell card from the entire duel. Bro, what? I think a lot of these cards are incredibly powerful and can transfer over to the new format when we get Legacy of Destruction. As you know, hand traps are going to be at an all-time high, and tech cards are going to be incredibly important. And while hand traps maybe seem to be doing a lot of dirty work, I would not count out board breakers just one bit. Cards like Forbidden Droplet are really good right now because not only can it address boards like Appaloosa and IP Masquerena, it's also incredibly good at getting cards that you may need into the graveyard. Also, since Forbidden Droplet does not target, it gets around some niche situations where your opponent can summon a monster untargetable, because a lot of times that can be really strong. But I think the biggest winner in Yu-Gi-Oh right now, this card is completely amazing, is Super Polymerization. If you start to break down some of the best decks in the game's inboards right now and post Legacy of Destruction, they seem to be incredibly weak to Super Polymerization. Tenpai Dragon in the battle phase, those monsters are affected, and they just so happen to be monsters with the same type and attribute. Easy Super Polymerization right now. And even now, with Snake Eyes, having a Cyberse monster and a Link monster is another easy Super Polymerization target. Most Yu-Gi-Oh strategies are summoning monsters with the exact same attribute, or has some niche inboard that can be super polymerized. Fused. They can be fused. And I think as we start to break down some really popular decks from the event, you'll start to see that these techs are going to be prevalent just about everywhere. Let's go ahead and start off with the top 32. The top 32 for YCS Raleigh was 16 Snake Eyes, 11 of them being pure, 5 of them being Kashtira, a little bit more on that later, 3 being Snake Eyes Fire King, 3 Runic Stun, 2 Branded, 2 Voiceless Voice, 1 Kashtira, 1 Flundereese, 1 Scareclaw Snake Eyes, 1 Pearly, 1 Labyrinth, 1 Runic Plunder. On first thought, you would probably think that this is still a tier 0 format and Snake Eyes had no changes that really hurt the strategy. But that is, again, just on surface level. Keep in mind, we received this ban list the weekend before, so players had less than 7 days to be able to practice a Yu-Gi-Oh strategy and then play with it. I think that this particular event is more so players playing with what they know than testing out new things. But then there were still players that did get adequate practice enough and topped with a strategy that is not Snake Eyes Fire. Let's talk about some strategies that are not Snake Eyes, as Thomas Virimani is playing Voiceless Voice, which I think is going to be one of the better decks, especially post Legacy of Destruction. The really cool thing about Voiceless Voice is that it's not reliant on the extra deck. So you can pretty much cram in every super polymerization target that you would want to, but the best pretty much being Mud Dragon, Garua, Predaplant Dracostapelia, and the Earth Golem Ignister, which requires 1 Cybers and a Link monster. Kind of crazy how IP Masquerade just so happens to fit that Cybers requirement. And another really cool thing about Voiceless Voice is Cerevis the Ancient and Ascendant. A lot of players are going to be playing Effect Veiler, Ghost Mourner, and Infinite Impermanence, and this deck is pretty immune to those card effects. It means that decks like Tenpai Dragon may not have an easy way to win the game, because when you're hand trapping a deck like Voiceless Voice, you have to watch out, those cards won't be as effective. This is easily one of the decks that I see is going to be one of the title contentions at YCS Indianapolis. Another deck that did incredibly well was Josh Levine's Purely. This is a strategy that did get an extra delicious memory, so we already knew that it was going to be a lot stronger. It was also a strategy that was pretty good in last format, and since Snake Eyes did get weaker and this deck got a little bit stronger, we could expect it to have more results. Also, keep in mind that this is a deck that can play really nasty cards like Dimensional Fissure and Dimension Shifter, but I think overall that this is the beginning stages of what a Pearly deck will look like coming into the Legacy of Destruction format. Top 32 had its fair share of crazy cool decks, but top 16 is where it gets a little bit more interesting. As you guys already know, Snake Eyes is divided into 3 different deck types. There's Snake Eyes Fire King, Snake Eyes Pure, and Snake Eyes Kashtira. Ironically, in the top cut, Snake Eyes Kashtira was the most prevalent. Now, I'm not going to dwell on Snake Eyes Kashtira for too long because the deck doesn't really change much, but the theory behind this deck is that monsters like Kashtira Unicorn and Finwer can be free monsters to send from your field to the graveyard for your Snake Eyes card effects, or allow you to be able to make Heat of the Fire Charmer when your Snake Eyes cards get hand trapped. Also, Kashtira can easily bring your cards back to your side of the field, giving you more monsters to be able to send to the graveyard, while also being level 7 monsters to help you synchro summon into Cyframe Lord Omega. The deck is pretty solid, and if you want to look at a strategy that could be one of the better decks, even with Legacy of Destruction coming out, take no further look than DB Grinder's list, which got to top 4. As you guys can see here, there is literally just 1 Finwer, 1 Unicorn, 1 Birth, and 2 Ravesorth. Everything else is pretty much straight up Snake Eyes. And in the side deck, you can see a lot of the tech cards that we talked about, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit being an all-around amazing threat, Crossout Designator, Snatch Steal Change of Heart, but more importantly, Deck Lockdown, a card that I almost neglected. Deck Lockdown is crazy good because it prevents searching and special summoning from the deck. This can be incredibly useful for decks like Tenpai Dragon, but also can hit more strategies that people think are rogue, like Yubel in Legacy of Destruction. This is a really cool card that I think is here to stay. Now, I hope I didn't completely snooze you out with Snake Eyes, but that is something that we could expect to see in the near future about this deck. It has moved away from a huge synchro engine to more either playing Dispatter or Omega, or playing the Kashtira engine with a ton of links. But ironically, it makes itself a little bit more susceptible to decks like Plunder Patrol, and Douglas Haddad actually piloted to a top 16 finish. Now, this is a Runic Plunder Patrol variant, so I don't know exactly how you would feel about playing the Runic cards, but the reason why this deck can be incredibly effective is because a lot of the strategies coming out are light, dark, or fire dependent. Plunder Patrol Ship Brawn is not a bad Yu-Gi-Oh card. It's actually really good, especially when it comes to getting rid of your opponent's back row, which fire decks are a little bit dependent on. And the Dark and Light Plunder Patrols are amazing at being able to check your opponent's board. With the Omni Negate cards being banned, we can see a little bit more skill expression with players playing decks like Plunder Patrol if you were incredibly good at them. If you guys look at the profile, you can tell he's incredibly enthused. And the last deck I want to talk to you guys about actually got second place at the entire event. And I think that this gives us hope that there's going to be more strategies that can come into the game and be able to be really competitive. Labyrinth had one representation inside of the entire top 32 bracket. It got second place. I think that is huge. Taking a look at Jack Zhao's Labyrinth deck, it's not even gimmicky at all. It's a real Labyrinth deck. Coolly enough, the only floodgate that he plays inside of his main deck is Rivalry of the Warlords, which a lot of people were playing throughout the event. But this is a legitimate Labyrinth deck that kills in a format where strategies are reliant on link monsters because of Destruction Daru mechanic. If you guys check the entirety of last format at any premier event, Labyrinth was nowhere to be found. But with decks like Labyrinth, Plunder Patrol, and Pearly making a strong showing, I think that other strategies will be able to jump into the game and be fairly competitive. It's not about Snake Eyes showing the most representation in this particular tournament. It's about Snake Eyes showing cracks and weaknesses for other decks to be able to take advantage of. But I'm really curious to see what you guys have to say about this format. Am I coping? Is it just going to be a Snake Eyes Tier 0 format? I think through this evidence, the answer is no. There are people overreacting without the correct data, and then there are people that are actually analyzing what's going on. But if you guys have anything you want to chime in about this, go ahead and let me know. I can't wait to see what you have to say. Until then, check out these other videos so I can catch you on the next one.